As I said, I wrote a column in the Daily Telegraph today and made the point that Biden now has on multiple occasions reassured Americans that Iran had been warned and, I quote, knew not to attack. Given they did exactly that less than 2 weeks after he'd said it, how damaging is that for his credibility?
I think it is quite damaging. I mean, there are a lot of these debates about the consequences of things like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was obviously a debacle in the execution. I think they tell us less in a way about the United States in some abstract sense than they tell us about the particular person who's in the Oval Office, the ultimate, the resolute desk, such as it is. And I think there's been a real sense with President Biden, and I don't want to sound too partisan here, but I think this is an objective statement that in the Afghanistan withdrawal, the way he's conducted the conflict in Europe, and now in the Middle East. I mean, I don't think I think that our adversaries and those who are trying to do us harm probably find him very calculable, measurable. I mean, you can even see right now that they're almost making excuses in the press through leaks and so forth for the Iranians, saying that the Iranians don't know what their proxy groups are doing, which of course gives the Iranians license to sort of say, see no evil, hear no evil, who will rid me of this meddlesome priest, so to speak. So I think this is a very dangerous situation. I think this is where, the North Koreans and the Chinese are probably drawing the most conclusions is about how this particular individual and his team make decisions. And that is worrisome.
Bridge, I know that you're very passionate about China and the threat that it poses to the West. Is there any chance that with America somewhat distracted at the moment on the Middle East and, of course, on Europe, the war between Russia and Ukraine, that China may see this as an opportunity to attack? I mean, you worked under a president, President Trump, who identified this threat almost before anyone else. What is your fear now?
I think that's happening. I mean, I think, in fact, they told the American press on the sidelines of the meetings with Xi Jinping in Northern California late last year that basically Biden didn't have the bandwidth and his team didn't have the bandwidth to deal with Europe, the Middle East, and the re-election campaign they're trying to run. And so they're trying to park the China issue. I mean, part of the problem here, and this is not an easy problem, Erin. I mean, this is a difficult problem because we are facing a world in which we're not as powerful as we once were. And that's not a hair shirt kind of self-flagellating point. That's just a reality. We got to make hard calls. There's no easy way. I think the big conclusion from what's happening in the Middle East is we can't assume that we're going to park or solve problems before we focus on China. We got to focus on China. And I think, unfortunately, that is happening. Whether something will happen this year before the election or before the end of the year, I certainly don't know. And I don't know anybody who can credibly claim to know other than maybe Xi Jinping. But I think you see things intensifying along the peninsula. You see the Chinese not backing off at all. There was big testimony this just a couple days ago from FBI Director Wray and other leading officials about the extent of the Chinese cyber penetration into U.S. critical systems. So, yeah, I think that is a very real danger. And of course, there was even a Global Times cartoon showing the Americans kind of, sort of waving their hands and sinking in quicksand, distracted. And I think that is a very real risk.
Now, you were one of Trump's national security advisors. Would the world, do you think, be in such a precarious position under his leadership?
Well, I think the proof is in the pudding here, Erin. I mean, it's sort of, I've been kind of pointing out on Twitter and so forth that foreign policy should be judged by results. And when President Trump left office, there was not a major war in Europe. The Middle East was on the way to being, as Jake Sullivan himself said a few months ago, the most stable it had been in decades. The United States was focusing on confronting China. The peninsula was, I think, less dangerous than it is now. So I think if you're going to look at results, and I think part of that is that calculability. I mean, President Trump said some things about Taiwan, for instance, that attracted attention, but that's a classic sort of strategic ambiguity position, and a position where I think people, aren't going to be able to calculate and sort of salami slice and take advantage and push him in the same way. So, and I think at the end of the day, again, the proof is in the pudding in terms of our priority being China. He was the one in his administration that turned us to focus on a tougher line towards China. So I would be much more optimistic with President Trump in office than with President Biden, that's for sure.
Thank you so much for your expertise, Elbridge, and looking forward to seeing where you end up if potentially President Trump is reinstated. We'll wait and see.
No presumption there, but thanks, Erin. Always a pleasure.